Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment, a podcast devoted to helping you overcome challenges in your life that prevent you from becoming the best version of yourself. Each episode features interviews with people from all walks of life about their journey of self-development and the principles they utilize to overcome their fears to achieve their desired outcome. Ready to be enlightened? Here's your host, Ken Primus.
Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, guys, I like to take this time and welcome our guests because I know they're coming with a couple of things very expensive. Their time, 24 hours afforded to every man and woman on this planet. How we utilize that time will tell us a lot about you. And I want to encourage you guys to become familiar with the power of and the importance of understanding time. The other is the journey. The journey is a powerful creator. It created the individual that is here before us. And I cannot wait to have him come and talk to us. First of all, we want to honor him and say thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment because we know that this is going to be a good one. Thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
It's an honor, man, to be here. And I've been reading up and grabbing a lot of your stuff that you've done on this planet while you're here a little longer than ours. And I want to ask you this question because I think it's an important question. I always ask my guests these questions. The first one is the interdependent part of our journey when we serve each other. How do you serve, man?
In as many ways as I can. On a practical level, I serve by providing jobs for many families. I'm retired now, but I did for a big chunk of my time, and that was one of my great privileges. I serve man by just being kind as I can to most people I encounter, or all people if possible. I serve in being a good friend to my friends, listening to them, and providing whatever support I possibly can. And then I'm hoping that my work is either entertaining or inspiring people. It's hard to know if it does or not, but I do my best.
I think you have done much and being ahead of us on some of the journeys and so forth. And so I can't wait to excavate some of your wisdom that you have. One of the things that we do when we visit our life here at Threads of Enlightenment, we usually start in the beginnings of our beginnings, I call it. And that's with our family. That's the unit where we learn quite a few things in life. We learn communication skills. We learn our belief begins to be activated there. We start developing our modus operandus, if you will, as to how we approach life and so forth. What was your family unit like?
I was lucky enough to have an extraordinary paternal family. My parents were divorced when I was 4 years old, and so I also had a very divided family life. My father had custody, and I saw my mother once a week. And on my paternal side, it was still is, an extremely united family. And so even though I lived in a place where divorce was extremely uncommon, I mean, I was always the only child of divorce in a classroom or wherever, any company, that family made me feel as normal as a kid can be, which is not all the time, but as much as possible. So I was very fortunate that way.
As a young individual, how did you interpret that when the kids were saying you're the only family of a divorce and so forth? How did you interpret that? Because kids have a way of voicing their opinions, if you will. How did that affect you?
Well, I was always claiming somewhat falsely that I had a privilege that they didn't have, which was a great deal more freedom. Growing up, and it was actually true, but the false part was pretending that it was the best of all worlds. When there was a lot of pain attached as well. That was my mechanism of not allowing other people's criticism or just curiosity to have a great impact on my life.
I think it's fascinating to me what we do to survive as young individuals and the stories that we invent and the things we do to put this safe space in place for us where we can manage the pain and all the other things that comes to us as young individuals.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how that storyline follow us all through our life until we begin to deal with it in the sense where we have to go and really investigate the reasons as to why we created the stories. And that's where basically, quote unquote, the journey begins, because we start going in there and go, wow, I didn't know this, and I now see why it relates to so forth and so forth. So yeah, I love that. That's why I usually ask that question, because we are so good at creating stories to survive, and it's amazing. And then we have to unravel all of that to now create a story to create the world that we want to create. And it's fascinating, the dichotomy that we utilize. So here you are, man. You're being different, and you have to manage it, and you told us how you do. As you're growing older, what was your relationship? Because again, we learn relationship skills, one of these foundations that we have to incorporate as we're growing. What was your relationship skill set, as you can remember, as a young individual learning to relate to others outside of his world?
Well, I had friends. I was very open to friendship, and especially the friendship of people who had some experience like I did that
Hmm.
made them marginal to the rest of the group. So throughout my schooling, I always had one very close friend. And as you know, I've lived in many countries
Yeah.
as a youth, and I always managed by having these very special close relationships, with boy my age at first, and then of course, yeah, because I was lucky enough to be in mixed schools in terms of gender
Hmm.
and religion and whatnot. I like girls at a very early age and always managed to have a girlfriend of sorts. And that was very comforting and a lot of fun.
Yeah. Here's this young man enjoying his life in his space at that time. As you're moving through life, we're heading towards quote unquote adulthood. In our family and in cultures, sometimes some cultures are stronger than others, where the education becomes the venue by which they are saying this is how we achieve life and so forth. What was your conversation like in your family as far as your education and field of study? What study did you pick up? That because sometimes we pick up some things, just to do it, and then there's some of us that are we're interested in it, and we found a thread early that we were interested in. What was it like for you? Which school did you pick, and what field of study did you pick?
I don't know if I can ascribe my education to a school as much as to my family. I had a father who was a literary and history nut, I would
Hmm.
say. And from the youngest age, my bedtime stories were the Bible, not in a religious sense, but as a magical book of history with wonderful stories. Religion played a part of it, but it wasn't the center of it in any
Yeah.
way. Also, the Greek classic, Homer and whatnot, Shakespeare.
Hmm.
These were my bedtime stories, and they were extraordinarily interesting and engaging.
Yeah.
And so that was my world more than the schools.
Yeah.
I had to go to different schools of different denomination
Yeah.
because I grew up in a time of revolution and
Yeah.
war in Egypt, where I was born. So religion was an experience that was learning about how the other
Hmm.
people live
Yeah.
and what they believe in. And it was great to have Jewish, Christian, and Muslim influences
Yeah. Yeah.
at that age.
That's fascinating to see the different vantage point, and yet the how each religion or point of view refers to themselves within that group, and it's really a fascinating stuff because I love history as well, and I love religion And the mechanism by which man uses to control man is really fascinating to recall that. And so here you are, man, being exposed to some of the classics in not just these guys as you're reading, you're telling the Bible and stuff like that. These are thinkers, mindset programming and so forth. The Bible tells us how to think, how to see oneself as much as it is a history book. Shakespeare also explores that mind and all of these different authors that you had mentioned. How did it affect you, being this young kid, being given this data all the time by dad and the family? How did it impact you?
That's an interesting question. On one hand, it provided an escape from nasty situations.
Hmm.
When you're a child and you experience your world changing because revolution or
Yeah,
a war, whatnot, religion and literature provided an escape, but also a tremendous learning experience.
yeah,
I mean, I remember being absolutely fascinated by all these stories, whether it was King Lear
hmm,
or Joseph and his
yeah,
multicolored coat or whatnot. I mean, it was everything was wonderful that
yeah,
way. And then you compare that to the reality of people killing each other
yeah,
and
yeah.
the instability that comes with situations like that. And it's an amazing counterpoint. You know,
Hmm.
it's balance that I feel fortunate to have experienced.
Yeah, that's beautiful to have. You have man. You're getting an opportunity to see man in such a wide spectrum. You have the war, child of are witnessing and hearing stories of war, and yet this child also, this individual, is learning about some of the most beautiful pen to paper language, if you will, and having both of them coming in your space and all day long in your whole life. What did the outside of the books and the literary part? How did the war piece impact you?
Well, for one thing, being European Jews in an Arab country was very destabilizing
Hmm.
because we were in constant jeopardy. I remember listening with horror to the radio where people were saying, you know, we'll kill the Jews, we'll slaughter them, we'll throw them in the sea, and all that, and realizing that they're talking about you.
Yeah,
And at the same time, in those times, there is a solidarity between people
yeah,
that is amazing.
yeah, yeah.
And so it's the beauty and the beast. And
Worse than the good of mankind. You get a chance to
yeah.
see it
And
both.
so, and then, you know, the theme of my book to a large extent is while all this crap is going on, life continues.
Yeah.
You learn, you discover beauty, you discover solidarity among persecution.
Hmm.
I had a group of Muslim and Christian friends who were extraordinarily supportive during that time. You fall in love, you go through life. So there's a level of normality in the middle of the most abnormal
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah, that to me, the fact that life goes on, it's really interesting because I like I said, I love to read and I'm able to sometimes see those lines where life goes on and yet outside of the life going on, outside your windows, if you will, and on the streets is absolute turmoil. And the always uncertainty of life gives the individual a form of anxiety, if you will, that one becomes familiar with. And for the lack of a better thing, even because of society and the whole thing that's going on, it becomes imprinted on that individual. And it's something that they have to deal with as they're moving through normal life, if you will, because there's a madness on the outside, and yet there's such a strong pull for normalcy and moving through. As you're growing up, this young man is growing up, as you said, falling in love and all of these different things, as you're experiencing life.
Exactly.
What was your desire amongst all of that going on? How did you see yourself with the normal living, with all of this going on? How did you see yourself navigating outside of that?
Well, that was the thing that, in retrospect, amazes me as how well, considering that we had to emigrate, start a whole new life in a completely different environment with different values and whatnot. The ability that a young boy had to adjust to all that
Hmm.
and make the most out of these tough situation, to me, is miraculous. I'm very grateful for whoever helped me through those passages because I spent much of my life in boarding school. I also had a situation where I had undiagnosed dyslexia
Hmm.
at a time when there was no understanding of
Yeah.
these things. And so you were either brilliant or lazy and unable to cope and whatnot. In my case, it was the dichotomy between my schooling in literature, history,
Hmm.
all of which I had great results, very high scores, and then math and the other things in which I was close to zero
Yeah.
because I inverted. I mean, now I know that I inverted digits and whatnot, so which made calculations absolutely horrendous,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that my teachers did not wonder how can you be at such extremes, either brilliant or a lazy bum
Yeah.
and nothing in between. So I'm very grateful and amazed at how one survives these things and actually grow and make the best of it on a very unconscious level.
Yeah. The power of the human spirit and
Yeah.
preservation and pushing through and all of these qualities I tell people is very important when you are living in life and when you're approaching your inner work, if you will. You have to push through and see the greatness that is residing within yourself. And it takes time. Everything takes time. Everyone thinks that, life is like McDonald's, have it your way, or Burger King, whatever it is nothing like that. It's when you have situations that come into us, we have to learn how to adapt. And the beautiful thing about it is that we are capable of it and making those,
Yes.
adjustments to whatever situation comes. So here you are, man. You guys are relocated. You're now going to step out, and there's not much disturbance, quote unquote, as war and all those different things. How did you handle that? Because different location, you have none of that anxiety, but yet I'm sure it's embedded in there. How did you manage yourself?
Well, I think it's mostly by looking at the wonderful in everyday pedestrian life. I've always had a look at things as interesting or even fascinating and whatnot. And I've been accused of having, colored glasses. And so, in the middle of a lot of difficulty, I mean, life in boarding school is not a bowl of fun, but looking at the very special things that made it not only palatable, but exciting.
Yeah.
And these are the friendships, the explorations of the world around you.
Hmm.
It's that optimism that some people call being blind to the world, but it's
Yeah.
a blindness that I welcome.
How did that view of life, that from that vantage point, how did it impact you? Because you became you're a prolific writer and you worked in NBC, all these different places that you've gone where you were led. How did that vantage point guide your life?
Well, growing up in a situation of war where you lose everything and start all over again and all that made me fearless in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
And so I always felt like, so what if I failed? I failed in a lot of things.
Yeah.
So why not try it? And so I could walk into the office of NBC asking for a job where I was not qualified for anything. I had just made one short film that had won a couple of awards, but that was the only qualification I
Yeah.
had, which was compared to the people I was competing with.
Hmm.
Really, no. I mean, it was, but you there, and and you get kicked a lot, but you also get what you want very often.
Yeah.
So that was my guiding light. Really, is I have nothing to lose because I've already lost everything a couple of times,
Yeah.
and so one more. So what? And that gives you a courage that you didn't know you had.
Yeah. It's fascinating, isn't it? But living life that way, isn't it? Isn't that how it should be in a way? I think where we have a degree of fearlessness in approaching life. I love the fact that you told a story as to how you entered in having just that one thing, because there are different ways. I tell people different ways to get things done. Sometimes the original way, you go through to get the job. But then there are those that were, like you said, fearless in your approach to that. And that those individuals that are quote unquote on the decision makers, when one becomes fearless and started approaching it, they can sense a degree of tenacity in there that they see, and they'll, because that's happened to me so many times. I remember as a young man going for a job. I found out that these two men were interviewing these people at this hotel, and I went to them, didn't know who they were, but I know these two men. And I sat down and told them that they couldn't do what they were thinking of doing without my help. And these two guys were the owners of the company. No idea who they were. I was talking to, but I had done some work before, and I knew all the physicians in the area. This is one of the HMOs that they were putting together, and so I knew that with my help, that they would be able to get their network developed faster. And so, but I didn't know it. I just walked in and told them, and they elected me. I said, and I had no skills, quote unquote, as contractor or anything like that. And I told them, I said, you give me 30 days. And if I don't do what I said I would do, and you can fire me and don't pay me. And they thought this guy was nuts, and they hired me. I didn't know anything about the business. I went and they brought us all together, and I listened to see who was the pivoted person that knew contracting and all. I went to her afterwards, and I looked at her. I says, I don't know anything. I need your help. And with her help, I became one of their best. So sometimes you just have to be fearless in life, man, to get the result that you want,
Yeah,
however you
and
do that.
while you're being fearless, there's a lot of fear
Oh, yeah.
that you have to overcome.
Yeah, yeah. There's always that. And I think because I was, but you always have this other thing behind you that's pushing you beyond that fear. And I understand. I love when people do that because it just shows one that there's many different ways to manifest things. And manifestation of things take work. Sometimes it takes courage to push beyond your normal way to get things. So here you are, you talk to me about your writing, because that is the first aspect or the first personality of you before you begin to move into all the others and your directing and all those things, the arts. Talk to me about that. How did that support your personality? Because you've come through much and as this young individual and you made the move, but you're still putting things together. How did all of that begin to formulate and create you?
Well, the combination of the stories that my bedtime stories, which very often had to do with just works of literature that I was told as a bedtime story, it led me to want to read
Yeah.
those stories. So I started reading again. Another piece of luck in my life was that I lived with my father and my grandmother. And my grandfather, whom I never met because he died before I was born, uh, there was a room that had been his study
Yeah.
that was covered with books. That was a magical place
Wow.
where us kid, me and my cousins were not allowed to go into that room because there were rare editions and whatnot. But I would sneak in all the time and read those books. And the first book that I read that wasn't a comic book or an illustrated book was The Count of Monte Cristo.
Excellent book.
I don't know if I mentioned, but actually, my native language was French. That was the language that European people in Egypt spoke primarily, and then, of course, Arabic and English, because Egypt was a British protectorate, sort of a colony. So I started reading those books, and I was always puzzled by the people behind the book, the authors, wondering, are these really real people or demigods?
Yeah.
Or how can you come up with all these extraordinary stories, the Three Musketeers and the Hunchback of Notre Dame and all those books? And can I do that? Am I able to come up with anything? And so I would start writing stories that were probably awful, but it was my way to try to live up to all the learning and the joy that I was experiencing from reading those guys. And that was a major influence. So at the age of 13, I knew I wanted to be a writer. I didn't know if I could make it, if I would ever be published, but I had this fantasy of, because my grandfather had been such a learned man, that extraordinary library of his was a testament to that. And I thought maybe someday I'll be in his library up in the sky, and he'll read, and he'll read it and be proud of me, all kinds of sort of imaginings around this mythical grandfather that everybody adored, and who was a role model, even though I never saw him
He
in
wasn't
real
there.
life.
It's powerful. As this role model wasn't there, and you had access to his treasures, if you will, and the treasures being all of his books and so forth, and you wanting to impress him as to one at 13 years old, man. Yeah, that is a powerful story. Here is this 13-year-old young man, young adult, who is activating his imagination, because that's where it all begins. I tell people that everything begins in the imagination. And when we look at the stars and we saw the moon and whatever, it was imagination that was ignited to say, hey, could we get a rocket out there? And then once the imagination comes into play, then we will take the steps necessary to make it a reality. This young man, how he began to take those steps to make it a reality. You said you started writing, just writing. Talk to me about let's go back a little. Your first time, you're looking at this paper for the first time, and you're said to yourself, I'm going to impress my grandfather. And then you take this pen and this paper.
Well, it wasn't only my grandfather. There was a girl I wanted to impress.
There's always a girl, man.
And she was 16 when I was 13. But luckily for me, I guess I looked older than I was. And so I pretended to be 16.
Yeah.
And then I had to maintain a level of conversation and whatnot. And as a 16-year-old, she was American, visiting Egypt for a summer. And she had had a few boyfriends. I had almost no girlfriends, just one girlfriend. And so she wanted to know all my previous stories, and I had none. And so I had to make up some. And that's how I started to invent love stories that only happen in my imagination. And it worked. So she never knew that I was 3 years younger at the time when 3 years make a huge difference. So that was sort of applying skills that I was exploring, didn't know I had, toward the devious but charming end.
Yeah. I tell people, because I grew up in the church reading Bible. I said, you know what made David go up against the giant? And they said, well, I said, it was that girl that the king promised him. I said, yeah, you have her. And he's like, oh, okay.
Yep.
And so we go up against giants just to impress those girls. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. So it was a grandfather on one hand and Patricia on the other.
So here you are, you start putting pen to paper and you started moving and you began, as you see, you began to, and the world knows now that you became one of those prolific writers, if you will, and you began to move through your life and go on different stages with people in different arenas. Talk to me about your human experience as to the fact that you're able to be with all these different types of people in all these different locations. What were some of those threads that you began to learn about us human beings being in different cultures and different races and religions and all these things that you see and you saw, you were exposed to the evil of men, and then you were exposed to the literary part or the beauty of men with their minds and creating. How did that all
Well, okay.
help?
There were two feelings, very distinct and almost opposite feelings about. One is realizing how we're all the same in so many ways, whether you're an Arab or a Jew or whatever. The similarities to me were far more striking than the difference at a time when the political system around me was stressing those differences.
Mm-hmm.
For the military regime that took place after their scapegoat was Israel and the Jews. They
Mm-hmm.
were the ultimate enemy, the evil that prevented them from reaching their potential or whatever. And so my discovery was the opposite of what they were saying on the radio and elsewhere. It was on the, yeah, we're so similar
Mm-hmm.
that before this happened politically, religion never played a role in the friendships and the daily life of Egyptian society.
Yeah.
It was never an issue. And the anti Semitism there was more political than religious, although it was also the time when the fundamentalism was rising. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, the notion of infidel became a major issue, and
Yeah.
where it had
It was
never been.
bigger.
Egypt
Yeah.
had been an extremely laic place where religion, in terms of the state, played no role. Religion was always considered to be a very private thing.
Mm-hmm.
You had your religion, but that was nobody's business. Exposed the dichotomy between the political line, what you heard on the radio every single day,
Yeah.
versus what my experience was with my Muslim friends and all that, was a source of stability in the most unstable situations. That was that at the same time as there were cultural differences that were
Yeah.
very marked. And there was something very special about that.
Yeah.
Entering a different world in which some values are the same, others are radically different, but they're equally interesting. They're
Yeah.
as good as yours. So it was this extraordinary diversity that we're striving for here now, today, that existed naturally.
Yeah.
Again, that was luck really coming with the negative of being born in a place that was in turmoil.
Yeah.
Came the other thing, which is a lot of reinforcing things
Yeah.
that kids who grow up in one single place all their lives do not get to experience.
Yeah, it's, I love your story because it shows so much of the ability of man to corrupt himself within the outside story of that you're talking about, the political realm and the programmers. You taking away from us the beauty of life, as you were talking about. They were saying one thing, and you were experiencing something totally different from what they were saying, and yet they continue year after year after year. And those that began to listen, how it infected and changed them to now try to get back to where you guys were. Isn't that amazing? As to,
It
it
is.
shows me how we're back, we allow ourselves to be used, if you will.
Yes, I mean, I think that there's something when you live in a world in which hate is prevalent.
Hmm.
You can either espouse that and join them, or go elsewhere altogether
Yeah.
and explore the opposite of that. And that was my experience, saying there's too much hate out there. It doesn't need to be. I don't believe, I'm an observer more than a participant, only in the sense that I never join groups.
Yeah.
I never adhere to a religion to the exclusion of others. And I hate crowds. And the idea of taking sides in a war or in a sentiment that is not in my nature.
Yeah.
I tend to see the positive in the enemy,
Hmm.
and that has helped me survive a lot of tough environments.
Yeah.
Boarding school is always a tough environment. There are a lot of fights and
Yeah.
cliques and stuff like that. If I had to fight, I had no choice but to respond, but it wasn't something that I was looking for.
Hmm. Yeah.
But this is what the world presented.
Yeah.
Take sides, join,
Yeah.
kill, insult, whatever.
Become hateful and turn on, I think that's our problem. One of our problems is that we haven't learned how to love yourself. And if I love myself, like you've learned to respect yourself, and from the stories that you've heard as a young man and your endeavor that you learn to respect yourself, when I see someone outside of me and my culture, I have to give the same value to that individual because he is part of the quote unquote same race, the human race. That has been brought up in a different culture and a different religion doesn't mean that he's less than. And so, this program that we have currently happening in the worldwide sphere, the people, at some point, I think we're going to have to realize that they don't hold the answers and that we hold the answers. And I think we need to come together and kind of like shut them down. But that takes time, that generation and generations of people to work those things out. I don't think we're going to see that in our lifetime, but I think there's going to come a point in time when the population has to say, wait a minute, we are being used and we need to begin to stand up to this and change the trajectory of the world. And I think until we do that, we will still be spinning in the wind. Here you are as you're moving through your life. Talk to me as to those dark times, because you talk about it, and many of us will never encounter some of the degree of the things that you did. But through those dark times, what helped you to navigate them? What was it that you hung on to give you hope, if you will, in those dark times? And what tools did you bring into your life? I know writing is a great tool to assist. What other tools did you bring into your life to assist you through some of those dark times? What were those stories you told yourself?
Well, I think the primary one was art.
Hmm.
I found a solution in all the books that I was reading, all the plays that I was able to either participate in school or just see. Again, my biggest piece of luck was having an exceptional father.
Yeah.
And he opened all these doors to worlds that were far beyond the mundane world in which we lived. There was a sense of things being transcended, and that is carries a lot of hopes, fantasies about a better world, a belief that you can help in a modest way bring it about. And that was helped me through all this. I think it was the fantasy of being a writer and being able to give others perhaps the same joys that were given to me on a daily basis throughout my entire childhood and beyond. That was a very powerful feeling,
Yeah.
that there is something transcending the crap and garbage of everyday life.
Yeah, guys, you've been listening to our conversation, and we're going to provide all the links for you to get to buy all his books. So his body of work is really good. I suggest that you guys grab some of his books. And as I mentioned to you, when you approach books, they house wisdom and knowledge and insights in there that can change your life and change your trajectory. It's happened to me many times. Many different books have done that to me, made me look into myself, begin to investigate who I am, and going to change my life. And so we want to encourage you guys to do that. You know how I feel about it. Buy books, give it out as gifts and so forth. I want to ask this question is to here you are. You have been through so much. You've gained, you've learned, and in the onset you had talked about just wanting to be able to listen to one friend and be able to assist and stuff like that. You have a bunch of friends that are out here listening to you. What is your advice to us that you have learned? And I can get some of the glimpse of where it would go, but here is someone who's been through much. And what are some of those advice you would give to us as we're listening on to this podcast about maintaining that, you know, those worlds that we have life, and then we have the outside noise, the wars, if you will, there are many different wars, the tribal wars, the political wars, all the different things that we have there. What is it that you have learned within life and war that you can impart to us so that we can become a better citizen to self and to the world?
Now, the instinct of life is very powerful, and I would tell any young person, don't let adversity get in the way of your life. Don't let it derail your life or reduce you to silence. Life goes on in the middle of the worst atrocities. You learn that, particularly as a Jew growing up in the aftermath of the Holocaust. A lot of those things now are forgotten or used politically or otherwise. You can thrive through adversity and be a better person. So keep on believing that things will improve on a personal and on a larger societal level.
Yeah, it's don't give up, man. I know it's you guys think it's a cliche, but it is reality. It is true. Don't give up. Don't give up. Just one step at a time, and things will manifest. So the thing that we do is we try to jump many steps, and then when it doesn't work out, we become frustrated and give up. Don't do that. Don't jump. Just one step at a time, and continue to live. Some of the best advice I've ever heard. Don't let adversity derail your life and derail you from growing and becoming a beauty. As because outside of that is much, as we talked about the wars that they incorporate the base human behavior of hatred, and which will just lead to more pain and so forth. But don't go there. There's no need for it. And so learn from adversity, allow it to be a teacher, just like any other thing, and learn and make sure that you learn to become the best you while you're in the midst of it. And be beautified, man. Be beautified. Don't let hatred come in and make you ugly. You could see it in someone's skin when hatred is there, their faces, their emotion, all of it. Be beautiful. So here you are, man. Today is, I think is it Monday? And it's 2025. It's been a long road. We see all the madness that are happening on the outside. From that vantage point and from the vantage point of life, and you mentioned about adversity, but from the vantage point of life, what would be your advice to a young individual who is in his state today, in Egypt, in America, in any country? What is it you would want to broadcast to the world if you had that microphone and you're standing there and 8 point something billion are listening to you? What is it?
It's exactly what we just talked about. Don't give up. Don't let the horror of the world extinguish your awareness of the beauty and the possibilities that are there before you if you would just take it, if you would just try to seize it and make it your own, because everybody will encounter obstacles and adversity at some point, and you either let you reduce to nothingness or you make the best of it and enjoy the journey in spite of all these obstacles and negative experiences. Whether you're suffering from persecution in some countries or just racism at home or whatever it is that is your lot, you can transcend it and make your life unique and wonderful. Can't say I've been there. I've gotten there, but I'm trying.
Yeah, I think We're all trying. I don't think any of us will ever get there. And there's some beauty in that. It keeps us moving.
Yes.
I think. So I don't want to be, someone had asked me that question about perfection. And I told them, I don't want perfection. I just want to learn because I love learning. And that's what excites me. The fact of perfection to me means that there is an end. And I don't, that's not appealing to me in any way, shape, or form.
Totally agree with you on that. Absolutely.
You know? So I don't want perfection. I just want to learn. And all of you guys that have been listening to us, this has been, for me, very insightful, powerful conversation to have. And I want to afford you guys the opportunity to learn from him. And so we're going to provide you all of his links and everything that you need to get in touch with him so that you can learn and he can be one of those friends that would be listening for you and be able to give you some advice as to how to navigate through your current situation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you. It's been a joy.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.